saying that your criteria is going to be to implement policies that represent potential Pareto improvements. So the idea here is essentially that, look, if the net benefits of implementing a particular policy are positive, that means that the winners must be gaining more on average than the losers, because presumably, so losing is like cost and winning is a benefit. So if there are more winners, or the total amount that the winners are getting is more than the total amount that the losers are losing, then in theory the winners have enough that they could compensate the losers and still end up being better off themselves. So in theory, if a policy has positive net benefits, you could structure it in such a way that it would end up representing a Pareto improvement where everybody is at least as well off and some people are better off. But again, in practice, being able to identify who the winners and losers are and then redistribute the benefits accordingly can be very difficult. Okay, so to give a more concrete example of thinking about cost-benefit analysis, I just want to spend the last 10 or 15 minutes talking about these concepts in the context of oil drilling off the California coast. So this is something that kind of comes and goes depending on gas prices, as far as I can tell. So I think before I started teaching this course, which would have been maybe 5 years ago or something, there wasn't really much discussion of it. The background is that so a long time ago, there used to be drilling off the California coast, and I think in 1969 there was like a fairly large oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara, and that kind of gave sort of momentum to environmental movement to make a moratorium on offshore drilling off of California, because obviously you don't really want to have oil spills polluting the coast, and that was kind of where it stayed for a long time. But then about 5 years ago, when gas prices really started going up around like 2007, 2008, there was some momentum to open it back up for drilling, and then I think it kind of comes and goes in terms of like when gas prices then receded, some of that momentum disappeared, and then as they've gone up again, you again see some discussion of it. But so the sort of key questions here in thinking about whether or not we should do drilling are basically, what are the important issues, and from our perspective, how does our theory apply? So according to the Department of Interior, what's at stake is basically about 10 billion barrels of oil. And the thing that I think is interesting about this example is that people often like to focus on what I'll call the easy question, but it's also the wrong question. So the question that people like to focus on is essentially, will drilling off the California coast or in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge or basically anywhere else, will that lower gas prices? So people see gas prices are high, they get upset, they don't want to pay that much, and they wonder if there's a way that we can just open up some more areas for drilling and lower gas prices. So answering that question is actually very easy. So turns out it's very safe to conclude that opening up the California coast or the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge or pretty much anywhere else you can think of to drilling is not going to noticeably impact gas prices. So the calculation you could do would be something like the following. Remember I said that the Department of Interior estimated there were perhaps 10 billion barrels of oil to be recovered there. That's not all going to be extracted in 1 year, of course. It's going to take a while to extract it. It wouldn't really be efficient to extract it in 1 year because basically you would just drill like millions of wells and then run them for 1 year and then have to dispose of them. So that wouldn't be a very good strategy. Also, would not be a good strategy from the supplier's standpoint to flood the market in 1 single year. So you would extract it over many years, probably a couple decades or something like that. So if we said, okay, let's think that's going to be extracted over about 25 years, you get approximately 400 million barrels of oil per year. So it's just 10 billion divided by 25 years. The world oil supply right now is extracting about 30 billion barrels of oil every year. And so what you would get is essentially something that represents about a 1.3% increase in the oil supply. So we'll assume for the moment a vertical supply curve so that we don't have to sort of think about how, so this is going to affect demand, but then that could potentially, if the supply curve isn't vertical, then that itself as the demand curve, or as the price changes, you could move along the supply curve. But let's just assume for simplicity a vertical supply curve. So what you have is the following scenario. So you have your vertical supply curve, you have your downward sloping demand curve. You're going to shift the supply curve out by, 1.3%. So basically you're going to shift that out by 1.3%. And then there's going to be a new price here. And that price is going to be somewhat lower than the price if you hadn't shifted the demand curve. So here you have the price without drilling, and then here you have the price with drilling. Now the question is, how much lower is it going to be? And that's going to basically depend on the elasticity of supply. So if you look in the literature, I don't think they have like an exact estimate. I mean, they have exact estimates, but whether or not you would believe that they identified the exact number is, I think, more questionable. But the general finding, I think, is that the long run elasticity of demand would be about 0.5. So that's the price elasticity of demand. So that's going to be the percentage change in quantity that you would expect from a 1% change in price. So this says that if we change price by 1%, then quantity is going to change by 0.5%. But that's actually the reverse of what we're interested in, right? So here we're saying is we're going to change quantity by 1.3%, and then we want to know how much price changes, because the question that's on people's mind is, well, how much is this going to lower my gas prices? So the price elasticity of demand of 0.5, you basically invert that. Instead of having 0.5, you had 2, since that's 1 over 0.5. And what you would get is that a 1.3% increase in supply is going to be accompanied by about a 2.5% price reduction. So in practice, what that means is that if gas were, say, at $3.50, then it would fall to $3.43. Crude oil makes up about $2.75 of that $3.50, and then the remaining 75 cents is like refining costs and retail costs and some taxes. So at $3.50, you would fall to $3.43. Now, gas is somewhat higher right now, so I think if you're thinking of like $3.99, then it would fall to something like $3.91 or something like that. But basically, the savings that you get here are the price savings you get here are sort of less than what you might think of as just being like week-to-week fluctuations in prices. So it's not zero, but when people say I want lower gas prices, I don't think they're saying, well, right now it's $4.43, and if it went down to like $4.35, then I'd be totally happy, and I wouldn't be worried about the price of gas at all. So you can pretty easily conclude that there wouldn't be any substantial price effect. But that's not actually like the question that one should be asking, or at least it's not the question that, say, the population of California and the California government should be asking. So the more interesting question is basically this question of, are the costs greater than the benefits, or vice versa? And that is sort of a much more ambiguous question, I think, in the sense that the answer is much more ambiguous. So in order to do the cost-benefit analysis, you need to figure out what the costs are and what the benefits are. So the costs basically are going to consist of two things. They're going to be the private costs, which are the cost of actually extracting the oil from the ground or from underneath the water. And then there will also be social costs, which we won't sort of get into right now because those are going to be what determines whether or not you would ultimately decide to go ahead with the drilling. So I'll tell you what the private costs are, I'll tell you what the private benefits are, and then you can think about whether or not the social costs would make the endeavor worthwhile or not. So for the private costs, you need to know how much it's going to cost to actually extract that oil. In the literature, so I looked up a number from a study by somebody who I know. So it's not like totally random, but at the same time, that's not to say that it is exactly representative of how much it would cost to drill in California. I'm sure there would be, even just in the California area, I'm sure there'd be heterogeneity. In some places it's cheaper to drill, in some places it's more expensive to drill. But just to get a ballpark figure, so Koch and Berger estimated that it costs about like $30 a barrel to extract oil from not very deep water situations. And we said there were about 10 billion barrels of oil, so you're essentially talking about like $300 billion of costs in order to get it all out. And then the benefits are going to be represented from California's viewpoint by how much you could actually sell the oil for, right? So if oil were $50 a barrel, which is significantly cheaper than it currently is, then you would be able to sell all 10 billion barrels for $500 billion. On the other hand, if it were 1.5 trillion, which I believe is significantly more expensive than it is right now, sorry, for $150 a barrel, which I believe is more expensive than it is right now, then you could sell it for $1.5 trillion. So the net benefits without considering the social costs are going to vary substantially based on essentially what the price of oil is, right? So if it's only $50 a barrel, the net benefits before you take into account the social costs would be like $200 billion for extracting all of the oil. On the other hand, if it were $150 a barrel, then the net benefits would be $1.2 trillion. The benefit cost criteria would basically be you're going to drill if the benefits of drilling are minus the cost of drilling are greater than zero, so the net benefits are positive. And the key here is that the cost of drilling should include both the private costs, which we already discussed, but then also the social costs as well. So this would be essentially looking at a number of things. So one thing would be looking at the the probability of having like damage to wildlife habitat and so forth from an oil spill. Also, of course, there would be like sort of aesthetic damage as well. People wouldn't want to have their ocean view houses overlooking an oil spill or anything like that. So there would be the oil spill related costs, and then there would also be sort of potential externalities from the burning of the oil itself, right? So to the extent that you're going to cause more air pollution and increase greenhouse gases and so forth, you would want to take that into account also when deciding whether or not to drill. I should say though that would be true if so that's true of sort of like the policymaker who's making this decision is either somehow like globally representative, or even though they're only locally representative, they still take into account sort of global considerations. So the case would be, so in California's case, it seems like the policymaker does take into account global considerations, right? Like the California has AB 32, which is this greenhouse gas emissions policy. And so the state has said that it's a policy goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, even to the extent that it's costly for us. That may well be the correct policy goal from like the overall social planner's perspective. It's unlikely to be the correct policy goal from the narrow selfish interests of California, in the sense that the costs of global warming are global, and even though California would rank as something like the whatever sixth largest economy or something like that if it were its own country, we're still only a very small fraction of the world. And so we're basically saying like, look, we're willing to take on these additional costs, even though the benefits are basically being diffusely spread around the entire globe. So the extreme case for oil drilling would be essentially like Alaska or something, right? Which to a first approximation has 0 people living there. It has these huge oil reserves. From there, like even if they believe that global warming is real, even if they believe that burning oil contributes to global warming, it can still be in the Alaska state government's interest to say, look, we want to open all this up for oil drilling, because they get all of the benefits to the extent that they're auctioning off these permits and getting the full value or almost all of the full value of the oil put into the state coffers, and the costs are paid only by paid sort of by the whole world, which 99.9999% of the world is not Alaska. So whether you're how much of the sort of greenhouse gas types of costs you're going to include is going to sort of depend on how global a view your policymakers have. But at any rate, setting aside that question, you have to think about, okay, well, there are these social costs. How big do the social costs have to be before the benefits of drilling minus the cost of drilling become less than zero? So in the case where oil is $50 a barrel, the net benefit of drilling is like $200 billion. In the case where the cost of oil or the price of oil is $150 a barrel, the net benefit of drilling is $1.2 trillion before you take into account the social costs. So what that's saying is that when oil gets really expensive, the social costs of drilling have to be really high in order to deter you from wanting to do it. So if you think about it sort of on a per capita term, in terms of per capita terms, I think like $150 a barrel, the social costs would have to exceed $4,000 per person in California before the net benefits of drilling became less than zero. Whereas at only $50 a barrel, they would have to be only $650 per person.
That's essentially like over 25 years.
So I think that's just a lump sum. No, so sorry. The 25 years. This is all assuming that they take out the entire 10 billion barrels of oil. So
this is like taking on by their calculation.
Right. So what's the question?
I guess it kind of frames your mind a little bit if you think about it like, oh, I have to spend for.
Yeah. So you're saying if you divide that number by 25, it doesn't seem as large.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. But so I agree with that. I mean, also the benefits obviously don't seem as large when you divide by 25, which is just the flip side of the same coin. But yes. So the reason that you'd want to think of this as sort of being the costs here, or the foregone benefits, is that you can think about the state auctioning off the drilling rights and then giving that money to the taxpayers, either in the form of tax credit or in the form of additional services, right? So when the net benefit is $200 billion, basically the difference between the market price and cost of drilling works out to $200 billion over the entire 10 billion barrels, then you could probably raise almost $200 billion in the auction. When the net benefit is $1.2 trillion, then you could probably raise almost $1.2 trillion in the auction. So the key issues kind of come down to, first of all, how much do you value the coastline, because that's going to inform sort of the social cost perspective, like what price would you put on the potential damage if there were an oil spill there. The second question is whether or not other social costs of oil are being internalized, or do you want to take into account like greenhouse gas emissions and so forth when you're doing that social cost calculation? And then the final and perhaps most important case would be, or question might be, how do you ensure that the taxpayer receives the benefit? So a key concern that you might have is that you might say, well, $20 is a lot. I think we should just open it up for drilling. But you have to actually run that auction and make sure that whoever wins the drilling rights is paying the taxpayer almost all of that difference between the cost of extracting the oil and the actual market value of the oil. If for some reason they just give it out to somebody at way below the market cost, then somebody's going to get rich, but it's going to be like ExxonMobil shareholders. It's not going to be the taxpayer, and probably California taxpayers don't really care whether or not ExxonMobil shareholders get rich. Okay, so that's basically it for benefit cost analysis. On Friday, we'll talk about how you solve for efficient equilibriums, which will be important for the next problem set. Oh, and I should say the problem set. I think the announcement went out by email, but I just posted the problem set yesterday, and it's due next week.